Today, I'm going to be spending 100 days revisiting one of my biggest videos ever, which of course was 100 days with Dragon-type only Pokemon. Now, before I jump into the video, of course, if you do enjoy the video, make sure to subscribe to the channel, because if we manage to hit 28,000 subscribers, I'm going to start creating 500 days in Fusion Pixelmon. Now, I know you guys want to see it because everyone has been asking for it, and without further ado, let's jump into 100 days with Dragon-type only Pokemon. On day 1, of course, I loaded into the server and had to pick up my starter Pokemon. Now, on the server, there are some custom starters, which meant that I'd be able to get a Dragon-type straight off the bat. So, of course, I ended up picking my boy Dreepy. And before I even had a chance to load into the server, I instantly had my rival Hawk try to battle me, in which he had a bag on which absolutely destroyed my Dreepy. Hawk has also uploaded his perspective of this video, so if you want to check it out, links will be down in the description. Now, on the server, there is a free shiny claim that you can get if you link your Discord account to the server's Discord. So I did that, but unfortunately, I only ended up getting myself a shiny Doduo, which is definitely not a Dragon type. So we continued on, and I decided to beat Hawk in my next rival battle, I'm going to need to make my Dreepy as powerful as possible. So I headed over to the EV grinder, gave him the power bracer to up his attack EVs, and then I went in to grind the attack EVs as much as I possibly could. And after I'd finally got myself perfect EVs on my Dreepy, I headed into the level grinder to try and level up my Dreepy as much as possible. But even the first level, which is just Raticate, was a struggle for my Dreepy, so we had to downgrade and head over to the level 10 Rattatas just to try and get a few levels on this guy. Now, of course, I'm not going to spend the whole time leveling up my Pokemon in the level grinder. It seems a little bit cheap, so I decided to head out and do a little bit of exploring, where I ended up coming across a raid den, which had a Grovyle, but unfortunately I wasn't able to catch it, because as you guys spammed me in the last video, when you Mega Evolve a Sceptile, it does actually become a Dragon type. So it would have been something I could have used. And whilst exploring around in the Ultra Space biome, I ended up coming across a Gible, which of course evolves into one of the strongest Dragon-type Pokemon, being a Garchomp. And whilst on my exploration, I ended up coming across a Beast Ball loot. Now, these have a chance of dropping Arceus plates, which I was lucky enough to get myself a Draco plate. But luckily for me, there was a player under the name of Ite, and he really needed that Draco plate. So I decided to trade it to him for a custom Paradox Form Dragapult, which is a Dragon type, which is called Depth Fear. Now that we had this super powerful Dragon type, I was super confident that I'd be able to defeat Hawk in our next rival fight. And the last thing I ended up doing whilst I was in Ultra Space was come across a Ultra Beast Pheromosa. Now, of course, we had to go ahead and catch this thing, but it is not actually a Dragon type, meaning we weren't able to use it. So after exploring around for a little bit longer, I decided to head out of Ultra Space, as I wasn't really finding any Dragon types that I would need. But there was a certain one that I really wanted to find that ended up being in a forest biome, which was the little tiny apple Pokemon, which evolves into a Flapple or an Appletun. Now, luckily for us, when we caught this Applin, it had a sweet apple on it, meaning we were able to evolve it straight away up into the Grass and Dragon type Appletun. I then headed back into Ultra Space, because in Ultra Space there are a bunch of raid dens, and I figured maybe there'd be a chance that I'd be able to catch even more Dragon type Pokemon just by defeating them in the easy raid dens. I ended up coming across a Drapion, which had some pretty good loot for me, and then I came across a Flapple, which is the other version of the Applin that I didn't end up evolving. So if I was able to defeat this and catch it, I would have both Flapple and Appletun to add to my team. So we ended up defeating it, but then when I went to catch it, I threw an Ultra Ball at this thing, but unfortunately, I wasn't lucky enough, and I ended up losing the Flapple on the final roll. But on the bright side, there was a bit of silver lining here, as a naturally spawning Hydreigon actually appeared above me, which we of course ended up catching. I then continued through and defeated a few more raid dens until eventually I came across an Extreme Hills biome where I caught myself a Jangmo. I then headed onto the GTS, where I ended up seeing a Lucky Block on there. So, of course, you guys already know I love opening these Lucky Blocks, so I had to buy it. just in case I managed to get myself a dragon type, because you never know with these things. So I bought the lucky block, opened it, and I actually managed to get an upgrade to a uncommon lucky block. I was feeling pretty confident now, especially since this thing was now a shiny guaranteed. So I opened it up and got myself a rare lucky block, which is a guaranteed legendary Pokemon. And finally, when I went to open it again, it upgraded to the final form, a Master Ball Lucky Block, which is a guaranteed shiny legendary Pokemon, which is crazy. From a common Lucky Block all the way up to a Master Ball. Oh. Yeah. Oh. Yeah. Yay. Yay. A shiny Entei. A shiny Entei. Obviously, Shiny Entei is not a dragon type, so we just swiftly moved on from that. I then encountered myself a Frigibax, which is a new Generation 9 dragon type Pokemon, which of course evolves into the Ice and Dragon type Pokemon Baxcalibur, which is a super strong dragon type. And after I caught that, it was time to head back into the level grinder to evolve all of my Pokemon up to their final evolutions. Eventually, I finally had my entire team up to their final evolutions. I didn't quite get them to level 100 yet, just because if we're having rival battles every now and then, there wasn't really much point in leveling them up to level 100 because we're just going to force set the levels anyway. We then came across this little area that had a little campsite in a dragon-looking area on an extreme hills biome. So we set up home and then headed back to the spawn to complete the little event that was happening, which of course was to collect all 25 of the treasure chests. Now with this, you get a bunch of rewards, including a bunch of random Pokemon papers, which we ended up claiming, and I ended up getting myself a Charmeleon and a Dratini. Now this is good because Charmeleon can Mega Evolve into Charizard X, making it a Fire Dragon type. And of course, Dratini evolves into Dragonite, which is a pseudo-legendary Dragon type from Generation 1. I then used my final paper, which is a specific Pokemon paper, which I ended up redeeming a Goodra with. Me and Hawk then had a bunch of lucky blocks to claim, so we ended up opening them all up, but unfortunately I didn't end up getting myself any Dragon type Pokemon, so these lucky blocks were unfortunately very useless for me. But for Hawk, he ended up getting an upgrade to a legendary lucky block, meaning he was guaranteed to get at least a legendary Pokemon, which could have been a dragon type, could not be one, but of course, knowing Hawk's luck, he got himself a Giratina, which of course is a dragon type, which was not good for me, I can't lie. He now had a Giratina, a legendary Pokemon, which I did not have, so I was very, very scared. And as a reward for getting the best lucky blocks out of our little challenge that we had going on there, I gave him a fusion key so that eventually he'd be able to make himself a dragon type fusion Pokemon. And before we get into our rival battle, I just want to say if you are enjoying the video, make sure to subscribe for more of these type-only videos. And of course, let us know in the comment section what type you want to see next. But without further ado, let's jump into the battle with Hawk. And into the battle, I ended up starting with Hydreigon and Hawk started with his Dracovish. I managed to take down quite a few of his Pokemon before Hydreigon went down, but Salamence was just fast enough to take down my Hydreigon in one hit. Now, the difference with these rival battles, though, is the fact that obviously Dragon-type Pokemon are super strong, but not only that, they're one of the only types that are super effective on themselves. So, when it came to this rival battle, it ended quite quickly with my Depthiz sweeping most of his team, and as a reward, I got 5 common Lucky Blocks. Unfortunately, though, I didn't end up getting anything that good. I got myself a Swallows and also a Skrelp, meaning I'd be able to get a Dragalge, but I already have a Hydreigon, so not the best rewards, unfortunately. I then went snooping over to the fusion machine to see what Hawk was up to, and to my surprise, he'd found a Pokemon to fuse with Giratina. He grabbed himself a Tyranitar, put in the Giratina, and he created a Gyranitar, the Giratina and Tyranitar fusion, which looked so powerful. I was so scared for the next rival battle. And with this new knowledge, I knew I would have to upgrade my team and make it as strong as possible. So I started off by catching my next Dragon-type Pokemon, which of course was Trapinch, and an Axew as well. I then also managed to come across a Mega Garchomp boss, which was going to be huge because if I managed to defeat it, I'd get a Garchomp Bite, which I could use to Mega Evolve my Garchomp, giving me the edge over our next rival fight. I then used some of my rewards that I got, like my rare candies and my EXP candies, to evolve my Dratini into a Dragonair, and then all the way up into a Dragonite. Now that I had a pretty strong team, I figured it would be time to head over to the gyms. Unfortunately though, some of my Pokemon weren't allowed in the gym, like the Dragapult and the Depthiz, which is Paradox Dragapult. so I had to replace some of my members with other dragon types, but nonetheless, I had a super strong team, and I managed to defeat so many of the gym leaders, including the electric gym, which is pretty easy for my ground and dragon type Pokemon. I then took on the rock gym, which I ended up taking out pretty quickly too, the grass gym, which was a piece of cake, but then it came down to the steel gym, which unfortunately I was not prepared for, and I ended up getting defeated. And knowing I can't take out a gym like the steel gym, I knew I would have to do a lot more training. So I headed over to the boss tower to try and get myself a bunch of rewards. And hopefully I'd be able to get some items that I'd be able to use later in our next couple rival fights. And after making it back to my house, I realized that the base was looking kind of ugly. So we ended up doing a bit of maintenance work, replacing all the stone with grass, adding a waterfall, adding trees, just to give this place a little bit of life. But during this time, I ended up having an event start. This event was a random tournament where every player that joined would get a random team of 6 Pokemon, and we had to fight it out. And I just want to say, my team was pretty strong. I had a Solrock, an Eternatus, a Primarina, a Pheromosa, an Audino, and a Pinsir. Now, I was very, very confident with this team. It was super intense, and of course, the other player on the other side of the final was my rival, Realhawk. After a pretty difficult and sweaty battle, which I'm not going to show you because it took a while, I ended up taking the dub over Hawk, getting my win in our first ever tournament. I managed to get some crates too, which ended up being a Mega Stone crate. Now with this, I got myself an Ampharosite, which is amazing because I also had a specific Pokemon paper, which I was able to use to claim Ampharos. And if anyone knows about Mega Ampharos, when it evolves into a Mega, it becomes a electric dragon type, meaning I'd actually be able to use this on my dragon type team. And for winning the tournament as well, before we started it, me and Hawk decided that what we would do is whoever won the tournament or whoever got further out of the both of us would end up getting a fusion key. Now, because I ended up winning, I got myself a fusion key, which I decided to use to fuse my starter Dragapult with a Greninja, getting me Dragoninja, one of the strongest fusion Pokemon on the server. And now with my new team, I was not afraid of Hawk. I knew that I would destroy him no matter what, because Dragoninja and Depth Fear are so OP. So I headed back over to the level grinder, leveled up my team a little bit more, then headed home and acclaimed another lucky block. Now with this, I managed to get an upgrade to a legendary Pokemon, but unfortunately, again, it was only a Landorus, which is not a dragon type Pokemon, which is another legendary now that I've had to catch and not be able to use. This is killing me. We had big plans for our base, so I bought a bunch of concrete and decided to start building the battle arena, ready for our next rival battle. Now, my idea for this was just to make a giant Pokeball, have an area on one side, an area on another side, and have both players stand on those podiums and then have a battle. And I'll be honest, it came out pretty well. I'm quite happy with how the arena looked. It's going to get spruced up a little bit more later on. Don't worry about that. But for now, I'm pretty proud of my building skills here, all right, guys? Like, come on. I then got my last preparations done before our next rival battle, getting my Pokemon leveled up a little bit more just to get Dragoninja to level 100, as a fusion Pokemon on the server get their signature move at level 100. And I needed to have that before the next rival fight, because Dragoninja's signature move is Draconic Kunai, which is like a really powerful dragon-type version of a Water Shuriken, so I could not pass up on that. I then spent a little bit more time on the move relearners, getting my Pokemon the best possible moves that I could, and then it was time to head into our next rival fight. I started out with my Mega Ampharos, and Hawk started out with his fusion Pokemon between Giratina and Tyranitar, and the battle was pretty close. I don't want to say that I was over-prepared for the fight, and luckily for me, it got very, very close, but Dragoninja was my final Pokemon left alive, and I ended up taking the dub once again. Now for this one, the reward was 2 uncommon lucky blocks, which I decided I felt really bad for Hawk, so I gave him one of the lucky blocks, but we only got a shiny Ursaring and a shiny Ludicolo. I then spent a little bit more time getting my entire team to level 100. I then spent a little bit more time working on the base, making it look a little bit more aesthetically pleasing, because before with just a battlefield, it did look a tiny bit ugly. And I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. It looks a lot better now. After that, I decided it was time to get myself another dragon-type Pokemon, so I headed down into the ocean and got myself a bunch of fossils, creating a bunch of fossil machines and the cleaners to clean up all the fossils, and then I created another dragon-type Pokemon, which of course is Dracovish. Then while I was AFKing around my base waiting for the fossils to finish, I had a Duraludon just swimming around in the little waterfall I created. So I went over and caught that guy because obviously he is a steel and dragon type. I then also claimed myself a Tyrant from the fossil machine, and then headed out into a jungle. Now, I can't remember exactly why I was in the jungle biome because there's not many dragon-type Pokemon that spawn there. I mean, maybe I was looking for a Mega Boss Sceptile or something because that's a Mega Pokemon that is a dragon-type. On the bright side, I did end up finding myself a legendary Tapu Koko, which I ended up catching because you never know who will want a Tapu Koko, and eventually I might be able to trade it for a legendary dragon-type Pokemon, so it's always worth catching them even if you can't use them. After that, another tournament started, and I was super confident going into this, especially after my win last time, although my team was not the greatest. So I headed into my battles. I beat the first player. Then my second battle happened, but unfortunately, I ended up getting defeated. So no rewards for me this time. I then headed back over to the jungle and made a giant platform as I wanted to complete a bingo card. Now, these bingo cards have a bunch of random Pokemon on them, and you have to catch them to complete all of your squares on the bingo card. Now, I didn't want to just complete one line or one diagonal or one down. I wanted to complete the entire bingo card to see what rewards I got. So I headed out and caught as many Pokemon as I possibly could until eventually I finally completed the bingo card, but unfortunately I didn't really get anything good. I then headed back over to the level grinder to evolve up a bunch more of my dragon Pokemon so that I could have every single dragon type Pokemon on my team. We then opened up a couple more lucky blocks where I ended up getting myself another legendary upgrade. I was so excited to open this one. I then got an upgrade again into a Master Ball lucky block where I ended up getting myself a shiny Reshiram, which of course is a dragon type, meaning I finally had a dragon type legendary. Let's go! Come on! After catching that guy, I then continued my quest to get every single dragon type Pokemon to complete another one of my challenges for this 100 days. I started by catching myself a Bagon and evolving that up to a Salamence, and then I also evolved an Execute with a Leaf Stone up into the giant long-necked Alolan Exeggutor. So I headed over to the ice biome to have a certain Pokemon in particular spawn in for me. I created a giant platform up in the sky waiting for this Pokemon to spawn. And while I was waiting, I decided to head back and take on some more of the gyms, where I finally ended up taking down the Steel Gym with help from my Swords Dancing Flygon with Earthquake, which made it so easy for me. I then headed back to the house and Hawk showed me that he made a giant dragon type symbol, which looked awesome. He then also decided to flex his Paradox Pokemon, being Paradox Charizard Burning Coat. I then headed back over to the gyms to do a little bit more training on my Pokemon, where I ended up taking on the Psychic Gym. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to defeat it though, so we headed into another server tournament. Now, this tournament started off pretty good. I had a really solid team, but unfortunately, once again, we made it through to round 3, but then it got taken out. And with that tournament finish, it was time for our next rival fight. I started off with my shiny Reshiram, and Hawk started off with a Hisuian Goodra, which I didn't even know he had. Unfortunately, a lot of Hawk's team was completely different and caught me completely off guard because I trained for his old team, and he changed up almost all of his Pokemon. So he ended up taking the dub finally and getting himself a rare Lucky Block. And of course, knowing my luck, Hawk ended up getting an upgrade to a Master Ball Lucky Block, which means he's getting a shiny legendary in Latios, which is a dragon type Pokemon. I can't believe it. He's had 2 legendary Pokemon and they've both been dragons. How is he getting this lucky? I then headed back over to my ice area and finished off creating the giant platform, hoping for a certain Pokemon to spawn. And if you figured out exactly which Pokemon I'm trying to get to spawn right now, let me know in the comment section and I will heart your comment. When I get this Pokemon, it's going to be insane. I then continued exploring a little bit longer and ended up coming across a Mega X Charizard. Now, this thing was going to be very difficult to take out, but luckily my Dragon Ninja managed to clutch up for us and take down the Mega Charizard. Meaning I now have another Mega Stone that I'll be able to use on my Charizard, meaning I have a bunch more choices on what Pokemon I want to use. I'm going to need to get all of the Mega Pokemon too, which is going to be a very difficult challenge. So I headed back to the jungle biome, and eventually I came across the Mega Sceptile boss, which I ended up defeating and getting me the Sceptolite. So I headed back to the base and noticed that Hawk was just doing battles with a bunch of the guys on the server. And if you guys want to do this too, make sure to hit me up when I'm on the server, because I will happily have a battle with you guys. It's so much fun. So I ended up watching Hawk for a little while, just doing his battles with viewers, and then I finally came across the forest I was looking for. Now this was a birch forest because I needed to find a Mega Altaria. Now, problem here is that Mega Altaria is a dragon fairy type Pokemon, so my dragon moves won't be effective on this thing, but luckily for me, I ended up defeating it after a few tries. Now with that, I had all of the Mega Stones that I needed, including a Mega Garchomp, Mega Ampharos, Mega Charizard X, Mega Sceptile, and finally a Mega Altaria. So I threw them all out to show off to Hawk, and I was pretty happy now that I had almost every single dragon type on my team. Obviously, I will clarify, when it comes to every dragon type, I'm not including every single legendary dragon type, because that would be a little bit outrageous. Now, whilst I continue to AFK on my ice platform, I decided to buy some Lucky Blocks because you guys know I'm addicted to these by now. Like, it's bad. I'm sorry. I think I genuinely have an addiction to these things. So I opened them up, but as always with gambling, I didn't get anything, so don't get addicted to these because it's bad. I then headed back over to the gyms to try and let off some steam, where I ended up defeating the Psychic Gym. Then I headed on to the next gym, which ended up being a Ghost type gym. Luckily, it wasn't too difficult for me, and then finally, I was prepared and I was ready, so I headed over to the final gym, which of course is the Water Gym. Unfortunately though, I ended up getting defeated, which was absolutely devastating. So I spent a couple days now just AFKing over on my ice platform, until eventually, it finally happened. Finally, yes! I got the Kyurem to spawn. Well done if you predicted that it was a Kyurem, because I want to create Kyurem White. By fusing the Kyurem and the Reshiram together with the DNA Splicer, I finally had Kyurem White, which was going to be super strong for me. Now that I had this, I thought, oh, it's fine, I'll go take on the gym again. But unfortunately, you can't take Kyurem into the gym battles. So I created my strongest team, and eventually, after a few tries, took down the Water Gym. And after taking out the Water Gym, I thought I was done, but it turns out there was actually another gym. And I ended up taking out the Fire Gym with ease, especially because I had my Depth Fear with his signature Water type move. And after heading home to flex Kyurem White to Hawk, turns out that he had something of his own to flex. And he pulled out a Mega Rayquaza. Like, how did he even get... When did he get this? I didn't even see it at all. I can't believe this, man. Oh, no. I knew for this final rival battle, I had to be super prepared. So I headed back over to the level grinder, and I got all of my Pokemon up to level 100 that I was going to use for this rival battle. Gave them the best possible moves. And now it was time for the final rival fight. Me versus Hawk, to decide who is the ultimate Dragon-type trainer. It was an intense battle, so many Pokemon were defeated, and it came down to the final two Pokemon, Dragon Ninja versus Mega Rayquaza. But luckily for me, I ended up taking the dub with my Dragon Ninja. My team was just strong enough to take down Hawk, crowning me the ultimate Dragon-type trainer.